how to develop and maintain new business and current relationships. Attending, you can expect deliverables that include a list of activities, tools, and resources from Dena and Jason and Dennis here. So I'm pleased to introduce Dena Wyatt, President of Marketing Evolutions, who will be facilitating the workshop.
Great. Thank you so much, Nathan. So as Nathan said, my name is Dena Wyatt. I grew up actually in the construction industry. And yes, I say grew up because I started in the industry in '94. I'll let you all do the math of how many years that has been. But I started obviously when I was very, very young. So grew up working for general contractors, from family owned to very large companies. In 2004, I started my own company and launched Marketing Evolutions. And now I spend all my time helping firms look at business development, how to be better, as well as how to nail the interview. Some of you larger subs might know you get pulled in with generals to interview for a big project. Generals all the time, almost nonstop, get pulled in to interview to win final projects. So that's where I spend my days. And as I got into business development, and I'm asking Jason and Dennis to also give this when they introduce themselves, of how did you get into business development? It always just intrigues me to how people end up where we end up, and how did we get to where we are? For me, I started off in marketing. So I was doing proposals, doing a little bit of client development and business development. And I quickly learned where the money was. So yes, I followed the money, and I quickly learned there was a lot more money and security if I was in business development. And if I was successful to bring work into the journals I worked for, I was going to be the last one to get laid off. And so learning how to do work, and like I said, there was a lot more money in that than doing an RFP, at least when I was back in the industry. So that's how I got into business development. And it just sort of came natural to me. I always loved being around people. I love to talk. And so business development was sort of a natural gig. And now, 20 some odd years later, if you did the math, I am still in the construction industry and still loving working with people and figuring out how we win work. So with that, Jason, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Jason Kleinelter. I work with Saunders Construction. My title is Director of Project Development. Has morphed a few times over the years, but essentially it's business development role. Work pretty closely with our teams and marketing group to go win us work, essentially. So I started off a lot like Dena. I sit on my dad's lap working controls of an excavating machine, and went to Purdue to study construction management, and moved out to Colorado soon upon graduation, and had pretty much did operations for about 13 or 14 years or so, and that looked like estimating and project engineer and project management. And then moved over to Saunders in about 2004 in the same roles. But prior to coming over to Saunders, I was seen as a problematic employee, and was lucky enough to not get fired, but actually take to the point of taking a psychological test. And in that psychological test, it was said, hey, the industrial psychologist came, she goes, you ever thought about sales? And I was like, sales? No, I'm an operations guy, and sales is not for me. And then I started really thinking about what that really meant, and what she was trying to say was, listen, you really enjoy the people side of this business. It's not the technical X's and O's that turns your clock. It's really the interactions and the relationships and the people side of this business that really get you out of bed in the morning. The camaraderie around building a project and winning a project and all the things that come with that. So I approached our management people that were at the time going through business development people pretty frequently, trying to find the right fit. And I threw my hat in the ring, and 12 years later, I'm still doing what I'm doing. So yeah, it's been an interesting thing, but that's ultimately why I got involved with it. Don't be a problem though.
Love that you were on the way out being a problem child until they realized just where they needed you to be. And it's so funny because I think a lot of times we find ourselves that is what's natural for us. So one of the questions we're going to ask you today is, if you're not a people person, how do you do business development? So we'll keep that in our back pocket for now. Before I let Dennis have the mic, though, if people do have questions, please put them in that chat box. I'll be keeping an eye on that and popping in and out and asking some questions as well. So with Dennis, tell us your story.
Much like Jason, I grew up swinging a hammer. My dad was a general contractor building custom homes when I was a little kid, and moved out to Colorado swinging a hammer, putting up some of the first condos going in Avon when they were still cutting trees for Beaver Creek. And then in 1981 or 2-ish, when the prime rate hit 21, they came around and said, roll them up, boys, because we're done. And then I went out and did other things for 10 years and kind of came back to the industry. Didn't go back to school. I was a non-traditional age student, started college at 35 and realized, much like everybody else, there's some different ways to make a living in the world. When I first interviewed for a business development position, the owner of the company at the time said, yeah, we just want somebody on a regular basis who's going to take our clients out to lunch and maybe play golf with them every now and then. And I responded, well, I think I might have to talk to my wife about that. Right. So, but it's been a lot of that, but in the midst of that, I did some sales training for a little while, but yeah, back to the roots of construction. And then since then, was president of SMPS a couple of times and been involved in the marketing and business development side of things. But yeah, much like Dena, I started my career 20 years ago on my dad's lap. Oh, there might be a couple of years unaccounted for in there. So,
Dennis, if I remember correctly, you also sold actual things like, this is service sales, right? Which is a little bit different than product sales. But didn't you also do a product sales as well in your lifetime?
I did, sold AV equipment for quite a while, and then even before that, I mean, so part of those 10 or 15 years, the in between times, played music for a living, and we had to go sell the band every weekend to go get a booking, and some of that just comes from the ability to talk to people, like Jason was saying, the ability to communicate. Engineering firms are always classic examples. The business development people for those firms are usually the engineer that doesn't mind talking to other human beings, right? So
it's the definition of an outgoing engineer is when you look at somebody else's shoes when you talk.
Right,
to
he
them,
looks
right?
at somebody else's shoes. Exactly. So a lot of it is just being comfortable with people, and being able to meet them on their terms. I don't want to have a commercial for Dale Carnegie, but Dena was Dale Carnegie instructor, and the ability to look at things from another person's point of view is a critical piece of business development. You have to be able to, in some ways, mirror or pretty quickly sum up the other person's attitude and being able to fit in with that rather than, hey, this is me, like it or not. That's an important piece from my standpoint anyway, about how to better get along with people from their point of view.
Let's continue a little bit on that track. And Jason, what advice do you have for people that aren't natural persons, the people that do look at their own shoes instead of the other person's shoes? Because in construction, very few contractors got into construction to do sales. The three of us are a little bit different, and that's why we're all on this panel, is because we had more of a natural sales acumen to us. And like Dennis, he started out in product sales, so it was natural for him to come into service sales. But for those that are grown up in construction, got into this industry to build things and see things come together, what advice, Jason, do you have for people that aren't a natural salesman?
Yeah, and I think there's the kind of the service to service type world. I do think you have to bring solutions, and I think if you're you do have to be passionate about finding those solutions. And that doesn't necessarily you need to walk into a room and be the life of a party, but you do have to have the ability to talk one-on-one with people and communicate your services and listen. Like Dennis was saying, it's about solving people's problems and really putting on their hat as far as what that person is going to be looking for, and then tailoring your services to meet that. It's not necessarily the business development isn't, that's a portion of it is building network, but at the same time, a big portion of it, if not 2/3 to 3/4 of it, is really solving problems and positioning your firm to become experts in those things and be seen as an expert to overcome some of those things. There's a lot of groups out there, a lot of business development people that just strive on entertainment, really shallow relationships, and really just kind of providing this really topical type deal. I think to be good and effective, I think you really have to be able to have the willingness to take a deep dive and listen to people and solve problems.
And so oftentimes,
can I piggyback on that?
Sure, Dennis.
One of the, during the sales training episode in my life, one of the slides we used to use regularly was one that said, "Telling is not selling." So what Jason is talking about, being able to problem solve, is asking what the challenges are and listening. The quote's been credited to a lot of people that says we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should use them in that proportion judiciously, right? So knowing what the problems, what the challenges are that your client, or in a subcontractor standpoint, from the general contractor standpoint, what are those challenges, and being able to fit your solutions into that, rather than telling, and then by the time the guy's sick of hearing you, he's off the phone and you haven't learned anything about their firm.
Yeah, that is so true. And I also think about what Jason mentioned earlier about being able to solve problems. And I think about that sometimes. I was not a technical nature. I got into construction because it just sort of, I fell into it. And then I got into sales because there was more money, like I said, and I love to talk to people, but I didn't have the technical background. And so when I was out meeting with clients, I did sometimes find it difficult that I couldn't solve problems. I couldn't bring that technical angle. But what I did learn is that I needed to just call in those technical people when I needed them. And I think that's a key thing, is understanding when you need to pull in others to help you out. But it also tells me, as a technical individual, you are exactly the right person to be doing sales, because this isn't just about random acts of lunch or golf with no meaning. It is truly about providing solutions. And as a technical individual, you're best set to do that. Which brings me to my next question. How do we know what problems need to be solved? How do we go about understanding or getting to know our clients in that level? Jason, you want to go first on that one?
Sure. Yeah, I know a lot of it's, listening to, and we're kind of coming up with this idea too internally, is really kind of coming up with what is that person's mission, right? Some of them are going to be really easy, like healthcare projects, right? To heal people, K-12 to educate kids, and but there's going to be other things that we kind of focus in on to really kind of either align with our mission to what they're trying to do, and really what their ultimate mission of the project is. But a lot of it's asking questions, and some of those questions are as blunt as, so why are you building this? What do you guys? What's the purpose behind this product? And what are you helping as a subcontractor? What are you doing to help solve the client's problems? And how can we help align with that? And asking those, they're technically really blunt questions, and don't be afraid of them, because I think ultimately it gets people thinking about, why do they really want to do this, and they may not have the answer, but it gets them thinking. And then when you really start to digest some of that conversation, I think it does get to a point where you are tailoring your services to what they're looking for.
Anything such as a stupid question?
No, but there are stupid answers.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, and as a matter of fact, to now push Dena's deal, we had Dena come in and talk to our firm one time, and the topic of discussion is what to say when somebody asks a stupid question. And you know, the answer to that really is not to hit somebody over the head with how stupid they are. You have to somehow figure out a way to slide into the right answer without making them feel stupid, right? So I think that they're just like the customer isn't always right. I mean, we kind of grew up with that whole idea the customer is always right. Well, we all know, for example, that the customer isn't always right. But what you have to remember is the customer is always the customer. And so no matter how stupid somebody says something, I mean, you still have to kind of manage that conversation to not make them feel stupid because they're still the client, right? Or in case of sales, they're always the potential client. So making them feel stupid does not help your case when bringing your firm into the mix.
That is so true. And I always told my technical people when I'd bring them along to meet a client, there are no stupid questions. Don't think you already know the answer. Don't assume that you have the answer. Ask those questions because the owner might be thinking something slightly different than we do. And the more information we can get from our owners, the better we understand them, the better, to Jason's point, we're able to solve their problems. And that's really what sales is really about, is finding those answers, solving those problems, and bringing something else to the table.
There's another piece to that is we in sales training, we call it question the question. Mm-hmm. Because if somebody asks a question, I've seen too often in interviews, for example, somebody will think they're answering the client's question and they're really off in another direction. And too often we don't question the question. What exactly which piece, as an example, it comes up often in interviews. So tell us how you handle change orders. Well, that's a very wide, broad topic. And they might be wanting to know how we mark them up, how specific pieces of that. But if you don't question that question and just jump in and all of a sudden you're off in left field and their question is coming from somewhere else, it's hard to actually answer the question that they asked.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. It's amazing when I was in an interview and the client asked a question and the PM just jumped right in and just knew exactly what he was going to say and how he was going to address it. And I'm sitting there and I was like going, boy, that's not how I heard that.
Right. Right.
Did you mean, and I jumped right in and he goes, yeah, that's what I meant. And I was like, oh, okay, well, let me take this one for a second. So you do get those opportunities. They're definitely, don't be embarrassed. That answer may have been perfect in that interpretation of that question, but the reality is that I do think questioning is showing that you're listening too, right? And people
exactly.
love to be heard. So if you're showing that interaction, that's you were going to be succeeding.
Speaking of listening, I see that Joe Taylor has asked in the chat, should you break it down into smaller questions? And I would suggest that that's exactly what you're doing, and trying to narrow in on what piece of that question is somebody actually asking.
The other thing when you're asking questions is really strive for open-ended questions. You don't want just simple yes, no. That cuts the conversation off. And if people aren't willing to share and invest, they're going to take that opportunity to say nope and just end it there. And so always ask an open-ended question to get the other person really fully talking on this. So to recap a little bit, just so we don't get lost in this, because Nathan promised you a list of some tips and tools. So number one, we have listening. You got to listen. Like Jason said, don't jump in, cut off the person, think it's going this way. As Dennis reminded us, we have 2 ears, 1 mouth. We've got to be on high alert and high receive and always listening to what the client's needs are. What are they asking? How do we connect with them? The second is we have to become good questioners. So question the question. Like Joe said, break it down into smaller things. Stay with open-ended questions to always get the other person talking. And I know, as I said, there was no such thing as a stupid question, but don't ask the question that you can find out online. So you wouldn't ask them, how long has the business been around, right? Or simple, how many offices do you have? It's like, well, if you looked at my website, you would have been able to figure that
Exactly.
out. So
Right.
do a little bit of homework before you go in there. So the questions you ask can be good, smart, intelligent questions.
And
Okay.
not to do 2 hours on questions, but I've seen this where I'm tag teaming. I've brought one of our project managers along to a meeting with someone, and I will ask the owner a question. I already know the answer to the question, but I want to know what the owner has to say about the question. And my project manager would jump in and answer the question for the owner, right? So when you go to a meeting, whether it's a client or whether it's with a general contractor or whatever, and you're bringing someone else, make sure that you have some ground rules set up with that person so that you're not talking. The point is to talk to the client, not to each other.
Absolutely. All right, want to switch gears a little bit here. One of the biggest struggles when I was inside working for a firm and I try and get people to do business development with me and get this idea that everyone is a salesman and everyone has some responsibility to partake in business development. The number one excuse I always got is, I don't have time. I'm too busy. So let's talk about time management. If sales isn't your primary job, for you too, 100%, this is what you do day in and day out, 40, 50, 60 hours a week. But if you're a PM, if you're an estimator, if you have another role in the company, how do you fit in or make time to do business development? Jason, I'm going to ask you to go first on this one.
Yeah, sure. So I think a lot of that is, a lot of it has to do with company culture. Saunders has just got a tenacious appetite for deals. And as a result, because it's sprinkled at the top, and that just kind of sprinkles down to the company through every position. I think it's got to be pretty genuine, fully recognizing that that's not everybody's job every day to be an expert, but when tapped upon to showcase, courtesy, to showcase, cleanliness, to showcase, high quality, or whatever it is that you're focusing on. You got to do the best every day, because it's you're only as good as the last project you build for a client. And you could have the sales team of a force of 50 people, but if not everybody is doing sales every day, and that's just doing the best that you can at whatever you're doing, then that really is the emphasis of what we do every day is really focusing on that. Now, the picking up the phone and calling clients and all that stuff, I think everybody's expected to make sure that they're keeping up with their primary clients. It could be a project manager for a general contractor or something like that, but you should challenge yourself and challenge your crews and your people, and especially the key people, to go out there and make a touch once a quarter to a high client that they enjoyed working with or had a good experience with. Showcase, bring some knowledge, or just check in with them, see how the family's doing and how the work program is doing, and really try to stay connected at a higher level. And that can be done pretty genuinely if you had a good experience. But again, that good experience starts at executing every day on what we're actually getting paid to do as construction subcontractors.
Absolutely. Dennis, any tips on how to maximize your time when we're busy? Time management, what are some tips or tricks that you can share with the group on how to make more time for sales?
So one of the things that I think you have to, and again, it's looking at it from the other person's point of view, is you really have to be cognizant of somebody else's time. Everybody is busy right now. So if I'm on the phone with someone and I'm listening for cues for them wanting to get off of the phone, right? Because we've all done it. You're on the phone with somebody and I have other things to do, or I'm trying to get to a meeting or whatever, and this person is just blah, 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 but keep, talking. You have to be cognizant of someone else's time. Even trying to set up meetings, asking for 15 minutes, right, is a lot easier than, hey, can I have a half an hour? Can I have 45 minutes of your time? What are we ever going to talk about for 45 minutes, for goodness sakes, right? So but trying to get 15 minutes and letting that other person extend it to a half an hour or whatever. And Jason mentioned, checking in with people about their families. You have to remember that people want to do business with people they like, and people want to do business with people who think about me or the other person, right? Understanding that there is an actual person with family on the other side of the phone is a very important piece, right? Even so much as, and it's one of the bullets that I wrote down on staying top of mind, remembering that a receptionist is a person too, right? They are so used to, hey, can I talk to Jason, and just like as quick as possible getting to that person without asking, hey, how are you doing? Is it raining down there today? Because it's not where I'm at, that sort of thing. I mean, they may not be the person you actually want to talk to, but they certainly are influencers when it comes to, especially if you give them a bad time, they're going to go back to that project manager or estimator or whomever that you just tried to talk to and say, who the hell was that? That guy's a jerk. You don't ever want somebody thinking about you like that.
Yeah, it's amazing with that. I think I was talking to Dena about this yesterday. It's just, you never know where your next job's going to come from.
Right.
And if you go around constantly just focused on one client type and one person in particular, and everybody else is second fiddle to that, that never goes well. I mean, I meet with every suppliers and vendors of materials to CEOs of major corporations and everybody in between, because you never know where your next job's going to come from. That person that's in that CEO position for a Bolt company could go over there and be CEO of some major developer by in next year, and you treated him like crap. Well, guess what? So it's one of those things where this market, especially in Colorado, is really, really small, and people jump all over the place all the time, and you never know where you never know where that next job's going to come from, because so try to be kind to everybody.
Yeah,
that's so true.
Joe's comment is correct. The receptionist controls who you get to talk to.
And I've had those receptionists and those assistants, feed me. You know what? He's in the office every morning at 6:30. Why don't you call before I get in? Because he answers his own phone. Score, right? We talked about gatekeepers and how to get around. We're going to come back to that topic in a moment. But I want to wrap up time management, because I know so many people are like, I don't have time. I don't have time. I make up this excuse sometimes. I don't want to exercise. I just don't have time today. I can't fit in my schedule. Well, you know what? I was taught early on, what gets scheduled gets done. So where you are not accomplishing or setting time aside to do business development, it's because it's not being set aside. It's not on your calendar. So if you've got other tasks and you're just not the pure salesperson, carve out time. And carve out time when you are in the best mood, right? Because Dennis and Jason have said it. You've got to connect. You got to be likable. You got to have the energy to talk to people. And so is that first thing in the morning for you? Is that in the afternoon because you're just brain dead and you can't look at one more estimate or one more set of plans? So maybe that's your time to talk to people and recharge. Maybe it's right after lunch before you dig into another set of projects or not. But make sure that you carve out time and get that on your calendar.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in on you. I think another important piece to remember is, and I think it's a challenging thing for a project manager to get their brain around. So if they have a stack of paper on their desk and they spend 2 hours working through this stack of paper and it goes over here, they actually see what they've done in 2 hours. But going out to lunch with somebody, driving there, it takes half an hour to get there. We're sitting here for lunch for an hour. Now I got to drive back. And there's this question mark that comes up. It's like, what did we really accomplish? It doesn't feel like I just moved a stack of paper from this side of my desk to that side of my desk and doing all these tasks. But that client contact, that building the relationship, is a huge piece of what we should be trying to accomplish in the construction industry.
I always joke with our guys is that, you know, the business development phone doesn't ring. It goes out and that's it.
Right.
And so you got to be able to pick that thing up in order to make it happen, right? To make that business development happen. So, you know, that project manager phone rings off the hook. And if you let yourself get distracted with it, you will be distracted with your business development efforts. So,
Yeah.
Dena's point, you really do have to prioritize time during your week, during your day, or whatever it is that's effective for you, to really prioritize it, because it is really important to make those connections, like Dennis was saying.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The other thing I did is not only schedule time, but I tried when I was back in an office. Does anyone remember those days when we were back in an office and we had a commute? But when we had those days, I always looked at my commuting time. And when I was with one contractor, I had a 45-minute one way. So I always planned out, who do I know are early morning people? Who could I touch base with in the morning? You know, coming home at night, is there someone I need to follow up with? I didn't touch base back, whatever it was. But I planned calls for my commute, both in and out of the office, again, to help maximize that time and touch base with people. And now what I even do is like, who haven't I talked to in a while? And I use my drive time to just touch base and say hello again. But if you don't put that on your calendar too, it's like, oh, when's the last time I talked to Dennis? Oh, wow. You know what? And you start thinking about it. You think about some of your clients. When was the last time you talked to them? Time flies.
Dena never calls me.
If we don't put it on our calendar, though, it can go a year. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's been a year since I talked to this person. So when you're thinking about that, put those flaggers, however
Sure.
you can flag yourself. Put it out in your calendar to call Dennis next week because I haven't talked to him forever. Call Jason in 2 more weeks because I just talked to him. When's that next step to follow up? But make sure and give yourself reminders, because if we just think we can hold it all up here, it doesn't happen.
That's a good one for, I do that once a month. Just go through and say, you know, you can go through your leads list and really track all those things. And I need to circle back to this architect to find out what they're doing on that project. That's all important stuff. That's great. You need to do that too. But then there's this, you know, I haven't talked to that guy or gal for 6 months and really enjoyed working with them, or, you know, got great information from them. And so it really does take an effort to go through and physically write that list down of all the people you're going to call. You know, our list as professional business development people, I'm sure Dennis's list, it can get pretty lengthy, and that's why we don't have any other distractions to do this job. But you know, if you've got a series of 15 clients that you do most of your work with, that's not a big lift to do that once a month or once a quarter, you know, for folks like that, because that is something you just need to kind of get used to doing.
Well, and I think too, a large portion of that call should be personal in nature. I've had architects tell me about other BD guys that they will not pick up the phone from them when the call comes into the receptionist. I call them "What do you got?" calls. Hey, what do you got? Hey, what do you got? Hey, what do you got? Without actually finding out, hey, how are you doing? You know, and oftentimes people will get around to the what do we have going, and sometimes they will start, and I will kind of stop. But yeah, all that's well and good. How are you doing in this COVID deal? Is your family healthy? Is your family safe? How are they managing with this thing? I mean, we need to be people. I mean, that's the biggest suggestion I can give to anybody in this format.
That's a great point. And we actually have, we do these little training sessions that, you know, and how to push business development to all the people. And it's exactly what we tell them. The very first thing is, don't pick up the phone and say, hey, what do you got for us?
Right.
You know, because that is just annoying. And it's annoying when you get a call from your vendors like that. And it's annoying when I mean, I think if, like Deb said, you progress to that point. It might be the last 10 minutes of an hour-long conversation. So, hey, are you staying busy at work, and what do you got going on? And you know, are you enjoying what you're doing, or whatever those questions might be. Right. But you know, I would highly suggest listen to Dennis on that perception. Wait, develop personal stuff, and really make sure you're building that relationship first.
Well, and you say that last 10 minutes, it's crucial, because it oftentimes, when you're having lunch, it is the last 5 or 10 minutes. And oftentimes we're like, oh, I got to be somewhere else. And that person's ready to talk about business by that point because they know they're ready to go. You don't have to always bring it up, but you got to be ready at the end. You can't be running off. So
I want to circle back to a conversation we had earlier, sort of about the receptionist, the gatekeeper. A lot of times now people have direct lines or a cell phone, and so we're calling direct. Talk a little bit about how do you get through, and if you get voicemail, do you always leave a voicemail? What does that voicemail say? Let's talk about how do we reach people and get them to pick up the phone. Jason, I'm going to let you go first again.
Yeah, Dena was asking me this question. I didn't answer it the way she wanted me to answer it, but I'll be honest. I just because of the nature of what we do and how we do it, we have a large network of people that we go through. And if I'm cold calling folks, I'm usually not going to get a response. What I really heavily rely on is connections. So if I'm trying to find the ABC company, and I know that XYZ company over here has done some work with them over the years, it could be that vendor that you sloughed off on, because you didn't want to have lunch with them or whatever. But that vendor does all their work. And that vendor has now made an introduction to me to that ABC company that I've been trying to meet with for years. And this literally just happened 6 months ago. And now all of a sudden we're pursuing work with those guys because we've shown interest through vendors that understand, that are like-minded to what they do. So I often say that if you can find a connection point to say, I would like a warm introduction through a friend versus me just picking up the phone and trying to get through that reception. It's hard. It's really, really hard unless you have just the world-renowned, relationships with somebody in that firm, or if you have a great reputation in that space. It's really, really, really difficult.
Mm-hmm. Dennis, you taught me early on in my career a great formula called the REBA. Do you remember that? And can you share what that stands for with the group?
Sure. So REBA was just an attempt to make an acronym for a process. One of the things that being prepared, there's two ways to be prepared for a phone call. One is to be prepared to leave a message, but sometimes I'm actually surprised and someone will pick up the phone. And I've not been ready for actually talking to a human, right? I'm all rehearsed on my REBA or whatever I'm going to say. But the R in REBA is the reason for the call. Okay, the reason for my call is we're a general contractor. We'd like to get involved, and so I see what you guys are doing. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to help you out. The help you out is something we'll circle back to, but establishing that connection is a big piece of that. Okay, we do some things. I see that you guys do a lot of this type of work, right? Oftentimes an introduction to an architect might be, I see something that they're doing in the daily journal that's similar to what we're doing, that we do as a general contractor. They may already have a general contractor involved in that. So I'm establishing the connection by we do those kinds of things for the next project somewhere out in the future. The benefit, bringing some sort of benefit to anything. This is a big piece, even if it's calling contractors that you're already doing business with as a subcontractor. The number of subcontractors that bring projects to us is, in my opinion, they're missing out on an opportunity by not doing that. Okay, by bringing work to the general contractor is the best way, other than doing what you say you're going to do, to get more work in the future. So reason for call, establish the connection, benefit, and what's your call to action, right? Please give me a shout back. I mean, and I don't ever expect anybody to return my calls. That way when they do, it's kind of like Christmas, right? But that's if I just go into it not thinking anybody is ever going to return my call, and oftentimes I'll tell them that, especially if I'm trying to get information from somebody that we've already talked to or whatever, or we know there's a project coming at some point. You know what? If you don't need us now, don't worry about calling me back. It's my job as the BD guy, as the subcontractor trying to bring some benefit. It's my job to track them down, not the other way around. So that's essentially what REBA is about. That benefit, though, I always promise our project managers that whenever I'm doing one of these sessions with subcontractors, I will say that the best marketing program that you guys can ever do as a subcontractor is to do what you say you're going to do. If you say I'm going to have 5 guys out there on Monday, have 5 guys out there on Monday. Because yes, I mean, we do a lot of hard bid work. Okay, it's a lot about the numbers, but when it's not about the numbers, we're going to go to the guys that we know are going to do what they say they're going to do. Simple as that.
Yeah. So how often calling someone is too much? Or how often do you need to call them to stay top? So we talk about staying top of mind.
Sure.
How often is too? How do we keep in touch with people without being a pain in the ass?
Well, and I think it's important to explain the term top of mind. What you want to do is to we used to call it the Chinese water torture, right? Is just dripping, so that when something comes up, they have you at top of mind. Any more than every week or two is too much in my estimation. That's too much. If somebody asks you to call back in 2 weeks, certainly do that. But again, saying that you asked me to call back in 2 weeks isn't assured that I'm going to get a call back. I would tell you though, the most important things when you make a call are to know when you called, what you talked about the last time, so that the next time you can refer back to that conversation, right? So you're not starting fresh every time.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it depends on it's situational, right? I mean, if you've got a pending project and it's coming out, and you want to have another call, and this time maybe you want an introduction to the superintendent or the project manager or the pre-con person, but you've only got one of those connection points, and but it's coming, so you feel a little pressure to make calls, make them away, right? Especially if it's heating up. But if it's something like I got a job that's a year out, and once a quarter is pretty reasonable until a certain point where it's a little closer, and then now it's once a month, now it's once a week, to make sure it is staying on top of the mind. And it really, it's if you think you would be annoyed by it, then stop calling.
Sure.
And it's really that whole thing of and like Dennis was saying, have a reason, right? I mean, have a reason to call and ask a favor or introduction, or hey, we heard that this wasn't going to be important, or hey, what have you guys thought about this? Or those are reasons to call.
Yeah, I love the comment that was just asked in the chat box about if they tell you to call back in 2 weeks, do you do that, or is that just a blow off comment? Now, I remember when I was in marketing, people were like, oh, just send me some information. That to me is a blow off. Send me a corporate brochure, right? That is a blow off. It's a way to get you off the phone. That's going in the trash can. In my mind, and I want to hear from Jason and Dennis as well, if someone asks you to call back, they're meaning that. If they didn't want to honestly hear from you again, they would use a different term or something. They would not ask you to call back. Am I right, guys? Or is that
well, it depends on how far they blow you off. They call me back in 2 years. If it's called back in 2 months, I'll know more. Then yeah, absolutely. Those are the ones that you make a little appointment for yourself in the Outlook, and it comes up and all that stuff, or whatever you guys end up using. I think if it's reasonable amount of time, I think it's definitely not a blow off. I think but you generally do have to get back to them, and make sure that you prioritize those calls to return. But I think they ultimately do want to talk to you.
That'd be my thought. I remember one time I was trying so hard to get in with this company, and we had the connection, like Jason said, we sort of got referred in. I was able to name drop. So I had the REBA that Dennis taught me down for my call, and I'd leave a voicemail, and I wasn't trying to be annoying, but I also wanted him to know that I needed to talk to him, and I was very interested in this project. So I probably called once a month for 6 or 7 months. Never got a call back. And then sure enough, it comes out, it hits the street, and there's a pre-bid meeting. And I was like, oh, I was so mad. So I go to the pre-bid meeting. So I'm like, all right, there goes our chance getting in early. But I went ahead and went to the pre-bid meeting, and we introduced ourselves. There must have been like 20 GCs in this room, all standing in the warehouse. And the project manager was so excited about being there. And he's going through a spiel about the project. And we connect eyes. And I don't know what happened, but he's like, you're Dena. And he comes up to me personally, shakes my hand, and apologizes for never calling me back. That was probably the best moment in my career. The generals just sat around. They looked like, well, we lost that project. And we actually won the job. And I credit a lot of that, though, that I was able to stand out. I left good messages. I wasn't a pain. I was consistent, but I wasn't a pain. When we finally did meet, the great thing is he sort of felt guilty that he never called me back. And I was able to use that to our advantage.
Sure.
Couple things here. Does size matter? Being a small company, how do we get in and do bigger jobs? Dennis, thoughts on that?
Well, so how I read that was, how do we get in to do for their smaller jobs? Michael's second comment. Okay. So, and that might be as simple as, and I know that Saunders used to, maybe you guys still have a small projects division, is getting into the right place. And that's, asking the receptionist or asking the people, who are the right people that I should be talking about for this size project. Knowing your audience is a big piece of that. And if I could jump down, tailing on to that, know your audience with Charlotte's question about email versus phone calls. I think it's really important to know your audience with that as well. Being, old school kind of guy, it took me a long time to even email people. I was, sales guy. I want to be on the phone. I want to be in person and all that sort of thing. There are a lot of people that just simply don't have the time. And sometimes email is the best way to get in touch with them. And I've even, it's taken a while, but in the last few years, texting those people that I know are comfortable with that. I'm always amazed when I try and call my children. I will never get them to answer the phone, but if I text them, they will immediately respond. So I know they're sitting on their phone, right? So
it's amazing. You get to a point with some clients, you can just go beers and question mark, and that's all you need to text them, and
exactly.
get to that point where you can have that kind of relationship. I would definitely take advantage of it. I do think I don't want to dismiss one or the other, but Dennis hit right on. It's whatever whatever you get more reaction out of a client with. If that's
right,
they respond back and they're Johnny on the spot with email. They never pick up their phone call. It's like, well, it's because they don't want to talk on the phone. Exactly. It should be pretty simple for you. Whatever one gets you the most traction.
Sure.
I don't even have one that I would recommend for that introductory one. If it's, I do a lot of introductory emails, but at the same time, I'm always that guy that always says, use your connections to help you get that warm introduction.
Mm-hmm.
If you can overcome those things, and emails very appropriate, I think, and that way people get to respond when it fits in their schedule.
Sure. Joe also asked about
hard. Yeah. Dennis, who's moderating the session, huh? Has anyone tried to moderate 2 business developers? This is hard.
I've been doing very good, I think. I think Dennis has been.
Like, he's taking my job away, man.
Talking as much as possible. See, they should have given you the mute button, mute others, right? Well, Joe had asked about CRM, contact relationship management software, and we use Cosential. We've used the different ones over the years. There are a few that are specific to the construction industry, but it can be as simple as Excel. You have to know when you talked to somebody last, what you talked about, and when you're going to call them again. And that can be in Excel. It can be in Cosential. It doesn't have to be an expensive deal. Act used to, that was one that worked pretty well. The fourth piece is what projects that you're trying to manage with those guys so that you have something to talk about.
All
But
right,
you have
so
to be religious about it.
Who has the better golf game? That's what I want to know. This has got to be sort of a
I'm sure
toss-up
Jason
game.
does.
Well, I don't know about that. I can show you 72 holes last weekend that didn't do very well for me. So. But I will say on the CRM piece of it, I think it depends on what you're doing too. I mean, Dennis and I are laser focused on projects,
Right.
and I think Essential is really laid out well for tracking projects. CRMs like a Salesforce or something like that, it's all about the client, and the projects come or the specific needs or whatever are secondary to the client, because I think most of us are probably centric on projects. It's really good fit. If you are centered on like a supply house and you're taking, suppliers and your top 10 clients are every electrical company in the city, probably not so worried about the projects as much as you are making sure the clients are getting their needs.
Right. Looks like a few people have said HubSpot is good. I'm not familiar with that, but
Either.
yeah. The big thing is you have to use it. I used to get in this conversation with BD guys or with sales managers, what's the percentage of even just sales guys that use their CRM? And it usually came up about 10 or 15%, which is a horrible number. But I mean, you have to track, you have to know when you're going to call somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I want to give a shout out to Mark. If you guys look in the chat box, he's like, hey, Mark here with Delta Drywall. Marketing, right? Because our name is only shown here. We don't have our companies. I love Deborah told us to wear logo things. So I'm like, oh, I get to dress casual and wear my vest today to show off my logo.
I didn't see that's where the question was. I thought you were just putting me on the spot. I mean,
yeah, but no, this is great here. No, yeah, and he actually asked it about the golf game. But I mean, that's marketing too, is how can you find ways to get that company name, to build recognition, to stay top of mind in not an aggressive or offensive way. So shout out, Mark. Nice going.
It is kind of funny. I mean, this question didn't come up, but during last year, it was hard. And who knows how long it's going to last? Probably next at least over 6-7 months. This COVID reality of balancing what people are comfortable going to do, and are you taking appointments outside the office? I can't tell you how many times I've asked that in the last year and a half.
Right.
And Dennis, I know, is a big golfer and skier, and if they're comfortable getting out of the office for an extended period of time, which last year apparently everybody was a golfer, it's a great way to network. I had literally happy hours in my front yard with neighbors that I knew were developers or architects or whoever. And then, man, I tell you what, it was a rotating group. I mean, because everybody was trying to get the hell out of their house, but try to do something that was safe at the same time. So it was you just got to get kind of creative around this stuff, but it has been a tough go in the last 9, 10, 12 months.
So how do you build a relationship? We talked about golfing, we talked about eating, happy hours, but I've also had people ask me, like, I don't drink. So last thing I want to do is take someone to a happy hour. I don't golf, I don't fish, I don't ski. What do you do? How do you entertain or build a relationship when you don't maybe have a hobby or you don't do things that you can invite people to?
I think there's got to be somebody else in the company that does what the client likes to do. Okay. So.
Oh, you mean it doesn't have to be what I like to do?
It does not. It does not. I've seen you be able to drive the golf cart fully well without putting it in a ditch. Yeah. Going out and facilitating something. If the client likes to go shoot skeet or something like that, there are all kinds of different activities, and being cognizant of what they like to do in their time. There are certain things that, guess what? What's the MS 150 or something like that? You do the bike ride thing. There are a lot of people that do that. I get tired driving 50 miles. Okay.
Yeah. I'm looking into
bike
flights.
for 50 miles.
150 miles. Yeah. I'm looking into flights, man.
Oh, come on.
Right.
Yeah.
Jeff
And I'm not standing in some cold ass river with a stupid fly in my hand, hoping to catch fish this big. I'm not doing that for 6 hours.
But I guarantee you at Saunders, there are 17 guys that do. So hooking them up with the right guy and going and facilitating. Those are the kinds of things. I mean, and even golf. I mean, there are a lot of people that don't like playing golf, but Top Golf has become a thing that you don't even have to be good. I mean, it's like bowling for golf, right? You got a table with 6 people and having a chat and all that kind of jazz. So
Yeah.
So I'm
you got to
hearing
be
two
creative with it.
things. Yeah, to wrap this up, I'm hearing 2 things. One, put the client first. What do they want to do? Keep that in mind. But then 2, if you don't do it, find someone else that does. And 2, it's got to be something you enjoy. Because honestly,
Sure.
I don't enjoy golfing that much. Jason doesn't enjoy fly fishing. It's torture to go out for 4 hours, 5 hours in golf if you don't like it. Don't do it.
Right,
Find
right.
someone else
Don't
to
do it.
So it's got to be a cross of what you enjoy. And if you enjoy it, don't do it, but find out what the client wants and then match that up to people there. Nathan, just let us know. We have 5 minutes left. I want to do a wrap up, make sure people jotted down some tips and tricks and tools that we talked about. So going back to the top, we talked about listening, how important it was, 2 ears, 1 mouth, questions, question the question, keep it open-minded or open-ended, ask questions and get the client talking. Ask good questions too. Research before you go in, know good things about them. 3, time management. What gets scheduled gets done. Carve time out on this and be smart with the time that you have. 4, getting past the gatekeeper, get to know people. It's all about connections. It's all about who do we know? Who do we get to know? Treat everyone with respect. You don't know where that next job is coming. And the more you can warm people up, the more they're going to do things for you. So get everyone on your side. 5, some tools. Remember the Reba. And this isn't just a phone call. But think about random acts of golf, right? Random acts of lunch, random acts of a phone call, whatever it is. Make every interaction with that potential client meaningful. What's the reason that you're taking them to lunch? What's the reason you're golfing? Why? What is that connection? What benefit can you bring to that firm? Make sure in anything, I don't want random acts. We used to talk about this all the time with our budget. Random acts of golf, of lunch, of fly fishing are really expensive. Have a purpose to every interaction. And last, stay top of mind, texting, voicemail, being out there, having fun with them, but keep those things in mind and that's going to help you connect. So that's our quick down and dirty recap. Nathan?
Thank you very much, Dena, Jason, and Dennis. We really, really appreciate you putting the time in. I know you guys did have a couple of meetings ahead of time preparing for all this, so it wasn't just an hour of sitting here with us. So I really do appreciate all of your time. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Last
everyone
minute
else?
comments, Jason or Dennis?
I would throw one thing out, and it comes from 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Sharpening the saw, and one of those is to read books about this stuff. A great book that everybody that is even thinking about being in a business development role or selling their company is called Selling the Invisible. Is it Thomas Beckett? I think the last name is Beckett. I can't remember. But Selling the Invisible and 7 Habits. 7 Habits is 25 years old now, still relevant. So
true.
Jason,
so true.
Jason, last thoughts? Since I'm going to moderate, I might as well throw it over to you.
Might as well go ahead, take care of the last little handoff. I think the biggest thing for us is, and I think for all business development, is that business development is a team sport. Number one, it is not one individual making all the jobs that come in, and that person is the key linchpin to your success for the year. It is not, and if it is, you will fail. Business development is everybody's job, period. From the lowest laborer to the highest CEO, and your best salespeople should be at the highest part of your company. If they're focused on safety, quality, cost all the time, 99% of their time, and they're not, as a CEO, president, or whatever, not going out and selling work, shame on them. They should be your number one salesperson out there. And like I said, it is definitely not one individual that can do this. So as a cultural, push that out into your companies and really try to focus on maximizing your outreach.
Excellent.
Good stuff. Thanks, guys. Be sure to join us for tomorrow's workshop at 1:30. Leadership is the topic with Tom Seedling from SCI Constructors. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the conference. I think Dennis is typing away furiously to a couple answers here. So.
Thank you, guys. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Take
All
care.
right. See ya.
Bye.